John, okay.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, okay. John, okay. Is the creative director, Makulu brand. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Nancy.
Now, where should we start from? In fact, both of you have been firing me within the break somehow.
I'm fired up. I'm fired up.
You know, let me start with you.
Okay.
Talk to me about the creative industry, because just during the break we were actually talking about you should also go beyond statistics.
Yes.
But I also think that statistics should be a part of it, because I always say on the program all the time that what you cannot measure, you can't manage it.
Yeah.
For example, I guess you both are chief executives of your companies, or so. You have staff and all of that. So,
Yes.
so what you cannot measure, you can manage. But there is a need for us to come together. When I mean us, I'm also putting myself in your industry, because at the end of the day, it's information you put out that I'm going to curate and tell the Nigerians.
Well, you know, first of all, Nancy, before you talk about the statistics and measures, you need to understand the components of the creative industry. Now, the creative industry, like I told you earlier, is that those industries that have to do with intellectual property.
Yeah.
Intellectual capacity, skills, talents, and your ability to be able to create. And they have the tendency to create wealth, to create jobs, you know. But I've seen statistics from the CBN, and you talk about music, you talk about fashion, you talk about information technology. But the most critical aspect of the creative industry is the visual arts, and it's not mentioned there. I mean, if I want to get money from the central bank, from one of the banks that are accredited by CBN to release these funds, I'm not qualified.
So there's no, yes, and I think you have a point, and I
So
think that
that's
the central bank should take note of that.
I don't know who
guess
gave those, the
listening.
policy makers did not
So you mean
think
the visual arts, you mean
the visual arts,
artists,
the painters, the graphic
painters.
artists, the pottery, the ceramics and all that. Art is big business. From the point that galleries started emerging in Nigeria, it became big business. If you look at signature galleries, if you look at Terra Culture, owned by Bolanle Austin Peters.
But Bolanle Austin Peters was able to access funds from the BOI. She did access funds from the BOI.
But the point is that she started with Access Bank. If you understand her the business and all that's where it started. But this is just one person. If I really start the galleries in Nigeria today, there are about 90 galleries in Lagos operating, and each of them has not less than 20 people that work for them. Bolanle Austin Peters alone, if I take that as just a point of reference, has been in the business, at the time she was 10 years in the business. She started with 2 directors. Today she has 20 directors. And every month she brings in 60 people into the workforce, employing labor and all that. And this is the area that you cannot just neglect in the whole essence of funding the creative industry. So the point is that the case that I want to make today is for us to understand that the visual arts is a critical aspect of the creative industry, and you cannot create such intervention funds, neglecting such a huge sector. You know, so there are statistics that we're going to have today for you to understand that the creative industry has so much to give to this country, because we're a mono economy. We keep looking at the oil and all that. If I give you statistics today, you'll be shocked how much that we can get from the creative industry. But I'm going to let
John Cummins.
Mr. John Cummins before I can read out the statistics that I have for you.
What do you think?
Nancy, thank you.
You are in the fashion sector.
Yes, I am. I am. But creative industry is creative industry.
Yeah.
Now, I like to start from the known to the unknown. Now, you said you can't manage what you can't measure. But when it comes to creativity, you can't measure what you don't put to practice.
Precisely.
That's why I said we have to, do more activities in the field, because you're using your creativity, you're using your talent to create value, and creating that value is activity. So we can measure statistics, you can pronounce statistics. Yes, it's important if you have to make a business case. But for a nascent economy like ours, then there has to be, stepping stones you build. Now, if you take this alongside the CBN policy, you look at, most people in the creative industry, up to 90%, don't have financial management skills. Now, the 10% that we get these statistics from are not actually who these policies target. So beyond enacting policies, that's the organization. keeping that money, out there, making it available, although, sometimes it's difficult. By the time we finish this program, you'll understand how difficult it is to access, these funds. But part of that fund has to be invested or applied towards organizing the sector. The creative industry is not structured.
Should that fund be spent to organize the sector, or is the sector's responsibility to organize itself to get funding?
No, let me tell you, government is going to benefit from...
Are you telling me, for example, now that the CBN, I'm just taking them for example, because the BOI also have a creative industry fund. Okay, let me say the DMB, that's the development interventions coming. Should they bring out money for fashion people to organize themselves?
Why not?
Should they bring out money for the visual arts to organize themselves? Should they bring out money for the musicians to put yourselves together? Or should those sectors put themselves together and approach as one voice to the intervention, people giving you guys intervention and say, come guys, we are here, take notice of us, this is what we need, and give it to us as soon as possible?
Let me ask you, how do you create value? You create value by putting up structures. Now, if you put in, as the CBN said, 200 billion naira, for our industry to work.
22 billion with the bankers committee.
22
Well, I saw on the website 200 billion. That's what is on the website.
But whether it's
200 million?
200 billion.
Yes.
Billion.
Whether it's 100 or 200 or 500, that is immaterial. But if the sector you're targeting, if the sector you're targeting don't access that fund, have you achieved the objective?
Let me understand where you stand. Sorry. Are you saying that these interventions, that some of the monies should be earmarked for...
applied towards helping organize the sectors? Because there is a two-way benefit. Now you have, like for the fashion industry, you have about 4 million people you want to bring into the tax net. You understand? And if you don't invest, you don't get returns. So if you invest in helping organizing them, then you are going to get your returns. But if you don't organize them, well, they may be trying, but you have your own specific objectives that you want to achieve as a government. So if you don't involve in that organization, then you will lose. At the end of the day, money will remain there, and it will be.
So are you saying that is the duty now?
I'm not saying that's a duty. I'm talking about it's part of a responsibility, because
yes, it's part of a responsibility, and I'm finding it difficult to agree with you. Are you saying that if my industry, for example, which is the media, we're also part of the creative industry. What I'm doing here is also
content.
Yes, it's content. I'm creating content. It's high intellectual property. Hold on. Are you saying now that those intervention funds should also be applied for our industry? Come together. Let's.
Part of it. I said part of it.
Yes, I know.
Part of it. Let me give you an example. Now, as I said, the creative industry is a predominantly informal industry. I work in the fashion industry. Now, could you believe, even when it comes to holding meetings for our union, I invest money and time in organizing meetings. But at the end of the day, you can plan a meeting for an organization that has maybe 300 members. On the day of the meeting, 200 will tell you, we had a customer to attend to. For them, it doesn't matter. Because not because they don't want to get involved, but because they don't have the presence of mind. And over time, some of them feel, what has government done for us over time? Am I sure this is for real? Now, even at my level, the training program we paid for, we went to access this CBN, to qualify, part of the qualification for these CBN funds. People kept asking there, is this thing for real? These are people who have paid to attend those training courses. So I think government has to be more involved in the organization. They may not spend money. They might spend money, but that is how you create value.
Okay, let me bring in Kingsley. What do you think?
There's really no point being in the paralysis of analyzing whether we're going to. I think we should actually organize ourselves and be prepared to access it. But in my own case, my problem is that the visual arts is not even captured in the whole process of the policy. But beyond that, if you cannot understand how much the creative industry is valued, if you don't look at what it is out there. If you go to California, California is the 6th biggest economy in the world. They are what about $3 trillion. 13% of the entire US economy is from California. They don't have a drop of oil. What they have in California is just Silicon Valley, the music industry, the fashion and all that, the movie industry. And yet they are about 13% of the entire workforce, employment force in America. We have in Nigeria today, galleries and museums that the government has set up, but they're not functioning. The British Museum receives about 30,000 visitors every day, paying £20.
30,000 visitors
every day, the British Museum. And 30,000 visitors every day at £20 gives you £600,000. That is what the British government makes from the museum alone. Now, the French Museum is the biggest visited museum in the world. 8.8 million visitors every year at €20. You know how much that is? If we don't organize, if the government doesn't properly fund the creative industry and bring in all the components together, we're going to have problems having to grow. We keep looking at the oil industry, we keep looking at oil because we are running a mono economy, but the whole world today is going creative industry. And that's where the entire economy of the world is heading towards. We're still far, far behind. We can't continue like this.
So are you saying that the creative industry is the new oil in Nigeria?
I mean, culture is the hub, is the gene, is the grand norm when it comes to the creative industry. If you don't understand the culture, the people, the lifestyle and all that, you cannot write their history. It is because we have the culture and we are able to understand the culture that we can write the history of the people and all that. Tourism and all this belongs to the creative industry. Are we really looking at those industries? Are we really investing properly there? Are we really putting the right people there? The culture policy of Nigeria in 1999 established the National Gallery of Arts. And the National Gallery of Arts is supposed to be the government platform that will promote the genesis in the creative industry, promote our art and all that. Are they doing it? If we don't have the right people manning these government policies, we cannot make much progress. But because we keep going around as a circle and trying out policies that are not properly directed, we have a problem developing this industry. And that's where to go. So we expect that the central bank should have a rethink, look into their policies and all that, and then call the practitioners in this industry together, and then bring everybody together. If I need to open a gallery today, I need maybe like 100 million to open a gallery that can give jobs to a lot of artists in Nigeria today. Where do I get the money? I'm not even captured. So when we are captured, then we can discuss whether it is accessible or not. And that's the major problem that we have today. So the CBN needs to have a rethink. They need to look at the policy. They need to capture every component of the creative industry so that we can have a proper articulated workforce that can work together and move the creative industry forward. So whether we can access it by organizing ourselves is a different ball game altogether. I think the creative industry players should be able to organize themselves and make themselves available to access these loans. Whether the loans are easily accessible is a different matter altogether.
Now, what do you think? Because from what the different interventions that have been ongoing, especially like from the Bank of Industry,
even that didn't capture the visual artists.
Yeah. Yes, but you actually mentioned like Bolanle Austin Peters.
Bolanle Austin Peters, you know, if I tell you how she started, I have the history of how she started. Today, she is a major player there, and they have been able to. Do you know that the daughter of the former DG of NAFDAC, Njideka Akubili, sold her work in America for $3.5 million.
Yes, I know.
Now, if you look at the income that flows from the visual arts, Benin One is worth about $10 million. Professor Ellen Aswi's works are selling for $1.5 million, $3 million, $2 million. It's worth about $7 million. If you look at the kind of money that you can rake in from the creative industry, from the art, practicing artists and all that, you must be able to have a genuine policy to promote the visual arts from the universities, from the curriculums, and then we can be able to harness from the industry.
Now, let's look at, let's look at, because I'm just torn between, you know, when it comes to, I always tell people, especially when you're dealing with creative people,
yes,
you have to be very, very careful, because every creative person is like on a hyper and believe, oh, okay, is my point. And yes, they have the ideas and all of that. So yes, I'm turning between both of you this morning, you from fashion, you from the visual arts industry. You can imagine if I had a Nollywood person here, I would do their program one of these days, but I think also that we are looking at it in totality.
Holistically, yeah.
Yes, holistically. You also talk about even music. As it is, You really want to come in? Let me hear what you have to say before I ask my other question.
Now, to stretch the value chain, coming from what my brother said. Now, there's a component of creative industry, that the value is so much that you can't even define it in terms of in monetary terms. That is, the creation of national consciousness. Now, if you watch Hollywood films, and maybe it's a film that involves, pictures the president of the U.S., the person will be depicted as almost immortal. That is a national consciousness. If you watch a movie where they're depicting the U.S. police, you will see the efficiency in how they work. So the creative industry helps you shape national consciousness, and that is a value you can't really quantify in terms of naira and kobo. And that's as a fact, if you come to the fashion industry, look at the fashion industry contributes 4% of global GDP. At a value of more than $1.3 trillion. But the Nigerian fashion industry contributes only 0.4% of our GDP. So you can see that there's a huge gap between what the global standard is and what the national standard is. And this is an industry that has capacity to create over 4 million jobs. If you go to, if you walk past any other building, anywhere in Nigeria, you see a tailoring shop, you see a fashion enterprise, sticking somewhere. So this is actually an industry, that has a capacity to create the jobs the government is looking at. So, why not focus on it? And one other challenge is, when government enacts policies, it appears to sit by itself. Some people sit in an office and then think about how can these things be done, and then they come up with policies. No, talk to the practitioners, involve them, so that by the time your policies hit the airwaves, people are taking ownership of them, because it's ownership.
Yeah.
Policies are not implemented in a vacuum, and that is one of the biggest problems that we're having in the country. This creative sector, it just has so much it can do, as a cornerstone of reviving our economy and pulling people out of poverty. So there is need for that focus. There is need to involve practitioners, so that by the time policies are enacted and publicized, people take ownership of them.
Mm. What challenges are facing the creative industry now that perhaps it's inimical to the growth of the creative industry? Finance is one part, which this development institutions.
For me, finance is a small part. Let me give you my reason. Now, let me start from what I know about the fashion industry. Now, a lot of artisans have almost 0% knowledge about financial management. Being in the creative industry is one thing to use your talent. It's another thing now to monetize your talent. And it's another thing now to know how to reinvest maybe your profit from that talent. So if you give someone who doesn't have financial management skills, even if it's 1 trillion, the money will go down the drain. So there is that challenge of knowledge management, of knowledge of business ethics. And if you look at globally, when you go to a fashion school, overseas, they teach you creativity and they teach you business. 90% of people in the creative industry here learn through mentorship, through local mentorship. And they don't teach you business management, skills in mentorship. And then in the global economy, you must have a good financial knowledge skills, good business skills to be able to survive. You must have knowledge of ICT. So, knowledge is a bigger problem. Structure is the second. But if you have knowledge and structure, then that's when you can be able to utilize money to achieve your objectives. Okay. So finance is part of it, but I think, it's even a small part of it, given that, you don't give what you don't have.
Well, the visual arts, the creative industry cannot move forward without the funding. And like you said, you have the funds, you can manage it. You have a problem. It is important that the government draws policies that can help the creative industry managers and players and all that to be able to understand the basics from the onset. For example, I'm a creative arts development economist. When I hold meetings with my creative visual artists and all that, I teach them how to manage their resources, how to be able to present their works. If you're a good artist and you're a good painter and all that, you don't have a manager who can manage your art properly. You probably produce your works for your wardrobes and all that. And if you don't have the presence of mind to be able to understand the field and the profession, you can't make money out of the business. So a lot of creative people who are talented probably do not understand the business sense. And then for you to be able to grow in the business, you need to understand how to apply the capacity to be able to present your works, to be able to move your production and all that and make money out of it. It's not just about having the talent. The business sense is also important for you to be able to make money out of the business. It's not just
let me stick with you a bit, you know, especially for visual arts that you're talking about paintings and artists. Ceramics and all of that.
Pottery.
Is the Nigerian culture encouraging the growth of your industry? I asked that purposely, and
yes.
your answer will determine.
The Nigerian culture individually are promoting it, but because we do not understand how this can be done by the government policies, the people who are running the policies in the government are not actually doing the best they could do.
You can imagine, for example, that your son or your daughter wants to enter the university and you ask, what do I want to study? And he says, I want to go study fine arts. I want to go study
painting.
Sculpture, painting and all of that. Some parents will say, you say what?
But that was before. Today,
has it improved?
It has improved a lot. Like I told you, because of the influence of galleries, the signature galleries, the terracotta.
But they're still not enough with all this that you're talking about. They're still not enough.
Well, if
you take a look at even the global art market in last year,
yeah.
I did my research. The global art market grew 6%.
Yeah.
From about $63 billion to $67 billion just last year. That's just the global art market, which we've also elucidated. We have just a few Nigerians playing in that market. We should not also forget even those that write. It's also still part of the creative industry.
Creative industry.
Yes, the late Chinua Achebes, the Wale Soyinkas,
everything that has to do with intellectual property.
Chimamanda, yes, Adichie, and all of that. Are we getting enough participation in that industry?
Let me be honest.
I'm not talking of fashion because I'll come to you in a bit.
The government is not doing enough to promote the visual arts. What I keep saying visual arts is because this is my field, and I'm passionate about it. If you don't bring these people who are into the visual art, which is a great component of the creative industry, if you don't bring them into the policies, there's no way they're going to grow. Some of the people that are managing most of the components of the visual arts today are not even artists. But it takes beyond understanding the industry to be able to do that. I'll tell you these statistics. 6,500 artifacts was taken away from the Benin. And historically, the works of Pablo Picasso, that's what, about $7 million
Do we have some
today.
data we can put on the screen?
$7 million is what historically these artworks are worth today. If you multiply that by 6,500, you have almost $40 billion. And how much is our revenue here? So we're looking for money from oil when there's so much. The government is not doing anything to even repatriate these artworks. I know where these artworks are today, in German galleries, in UK and all that. Frobenius came into Nigeria in 1910, went into Ife, took away a lot of the masks there, the local and all that, until the British colonial masters heard about it and went into Ife and fought with him and then took part of that. He took part of these masks and artifacts, and today they are in galleries, in museums in Germany. Are we making efforts to get them back? We're not making enough efforts. It's only 2 or 3 ministers in the past that made efforts to try to write to get this sent back. But it is difficult for us to move forward if we don't understand where we have gone and where we are going tomorrow.
Now,
so the government needs to put more money into the creative industry. It's not just announcing how much money you want to give to the players, but are they really getting this money? I saw on TV some of the Nollywood players in a meeting with Access Bank, and they were having problems because they're asked to put 30% equity to be able to raise this money. Assuming you're asked to, you want to access 15 million, and you are asked to put down 30% equity, that's 15 million. If you have 15 million, you probably want to go ahead and do your business. You don't want to go and... So are these funds really available? They're there, but how can you access them? And that's the problem.
Okay, let me bring you in here. The fashion industry also has its own peculiar problems. You would see that, I don't know if the fashion industry right now, of course, is providing jobs. I'm not just saying, I even want to say that perhaps...
Are they organized enough?
Yes, are they organized enough? Organization is something, but I also see that because of the unemployment that is rising in the country, a lot of young people want to go to where they think they can easily create a livelihood. And the creative industry is a...
Just subsistence level livelihood.
Yes, subsistence level livelihood. And the creative industry is something that a lot of people are falling back on. Yeah, they are trying to like go into the Nollywood sector, either as a photographer or a film person or, you know, or a writer. They are trying to come into the fashion. If you can even, some are not even, have not gone to fashion school. Some will be like, for me, if I have money, for example, and I see the business is creative, I put like 2 or 3
It is
tailors,
easier to go into that.
Yes, 2 or 3 tailors in a shop
arts
and get money from people sewing clothes and all of that. You see people also going to makeup. Makeup is also creative industry.
Oh, yes.
A lot of our young people, makeup is also needed in Nollywood. So photography, making money. I can tell you what my photographer is making from me, because, you know, when he comes to me, I'm like, oh, Nancy, I'm like, this amount of money, why, you know, and all of that. So you see that a lot, and he's a graduate, in fact. He didn't even also study that. So you're seeing a lot of young people, you know, patching on the creative industry to make money, to not make livelihood.
Livelihood,
See,
actually.
Yes.
Subsistence
what
livelihood.
happens is, if people are speculating towards a particular industry, that means that potential there. That is business 101. People don't go where there's no potential. Now, that's why I think...
Potential or just something out of necessity.
Even if it's necessity, but there's potential. So why are they not going to maybe a push wheelbarrow? Why are they not going to other skill sets? It means, you know, there is potential there. Now, let me give you an example. Between fashion and technology. Technology, everyone is talking about high-tech phones and etc., etc. Now, the tech industry is skill-intensive, labor-intensive, etc., etc. The fashion industry is the only industry you can go in there today and start making revenue, not profit, but revenue tomorrow. It's an industry that you don't have to have, if it's sewing, you don't have to have sewing skills to become, to own a clothing business. You understand? So there is potential there. Now, why I keep talking about structure and organization is because if there is potential there, when you organize and structure, you are able to benefit or harness that potential. That's why I said it's an industry that has potential to generate up to 4 million jobs. And 90% of those 4 million jobs are in the informal sector. So if government organizes them and they start paying tax, do you know what tax revenue that can generate for government?
Okay. Let's just, because we have a few minutes to the end of the show, but let's take this comment coming through on Twitter from Kennedy Igwe, and I think this question is, okay, good morning, Nancy. The CBN Creative Industry Financing Initiative is about creating jobs and gaining forex. Please ask your guest, does the visual art have the ability to acquire forex for Nigeria as against subsectors of the creative industry identified by central bank? How much patronage do they get locally, much less internationally?
Good question. Nancy,
that was why I asked that question earlier.
I told you already, works of Professor Ella Dasui were selling for £800, £200, £500 until the galleries in Lagos started organizing auctions. Today, his works are selling for 8 million, 5 million, 6 million. Now, one painting that is sold, the Bush Baby sold by Njideka Akinle Crosby for $3.7 million is enough to probably tar the entire roads in one part of the city and all that. The awareness is coming there, but the point is that the people are not patronizing the industry enough because they don't understand the awareness is not there yet.
Now, how much patronage are you getting locally, like what he asked? Which why I asked that earlier question.
Okay.
Yes, in terms of, is the environment also encouraging your growth?
It is beginning. Today, the governor of Ogun State, the first step he took in governance was to create the creative village. Now, in my state, my governor, during his inauguration, put an art exhibition as part of his inauguration
Which
program.
state is that?
Imo State,
Okay.
which I'll give you the documents later. Imo State. Part of the inauguration program was an art exhibition. And that exhibition, which I organized, was the biggest show of that inauguration. And there were over 5,000 visitors to that. And I know how much artworks that were sold, that we sold at that exhibition. So it is important for us to understand that with more than 90 galleries in Lagos today, paying taxes and employing labor and all that, and in Abuja, there are about 46 galleries. These galleries are probably not properly captured by the FIRS, and they don't understand how we can get revenues from there. The awareness is there. Today, there are more than 10,000 artists practicing in Abuja.
So you're saying that the growth of people patronizing artworks.
Oh yes,
going.
oh yes.
For me, I love artworks. If you come to my house, you see
if you want to
see a lot of artworks.
If you want to do a portrait now, Nancy,
or paintings.
If you want to do your portrait today,
Yes.
you won't pay any less than 250,000 for a portrait. But there are still roadside artists that can do it for you for 5. It depends on if you want quality or not. So it is important for us to understand. But you're not going to pay that kind of money as far as I'm concerned. But Nancy, it is important for us to understand that the awareness is coming there. The awareness is there. But the government needs to put the right people to run government agencies. I told you earlier that the cultural policy that created the National Gallery of Art today has they have the mandate to do what is
I see my director has already ended the show before we did. But I want to say many thanks for joining us on the program today. In fact, I must also say that a 19-year-old Nigerian medical student became the first youngest artist in the world to put a portrait in the Cyprus Arts Museum. And in fact, she's a daughter of a friend of the show, Mrs. Dorati Uko, a 19-year-old medical student. So many thanks. I'll see you all next week. Be the best you can be and be the change you want to see. You see what I talked about, creative industry. We are creative people. We won't live here today. But I'll see you all on Monday. Bye now.